Hello and welcome to another Canguro English Daily Digest. My name is Christian and today is Tuesday, the best day of the week. Today we're going to be talking about economics. And the reason we're going to talk about economics is because yesterday the Nobel Prize Committee awarded the Nobel Prize to three economists. So there's Esther Duflo, her husband Abhijit Banerjee, and Michael Kremer. Sorry about the pronunciations of the names. Now, the question is, why would the Nobel Prize for Economics be interesting in a channel about learning English? Well, because education is not free. I mean, it might be free for the students who go to school, but in the system, the money has to come from somewhere, right? So, maybe the student doesn't pay, but society pays through taxes and things like that. So economics and other things like healthcare and policing and all of these very important aspects of society are all very closely related together. So money and education are bedfellows, right? So what I want to do is I want to talk about Professor Duflo's work. And I've divided some of her work into four categories, okay? So this may not seem like something interesting for you, learning English as a second language, but there are some really important lessons from her work about learning. Deep lessons, okay? So the first thing is a lot of her work focuses on poor countries. In fact, she wrote a book called Poor Economics, and one of her main kind of criticisms about the way that we try to fight poverty in 2019 is that most people, especially people in power, just don't understand poverty, what it means, how it affects people. There's lots of misconceptions and myths, and she wants to fight against that. And so let's first start by talking about how economics and poverty can affect teachers. So some of this is very surprising, even to me. Okay, so this is the first piece of work we're going to talk about, and it's called "Incentives Work: Getting Teachers to Come to School." Right. So let me give you a bit of a background. So this work is from rural Rajasthan in India, and listen to this. In this part of India, teacher absenteeism is high. So basically, teachers don't actually go to teach very often. In our baseline study, evaluated in August 2003, the absence rate was 44%. I mean, that blows my mind. So 44% of the time in this place, the teachers are not even going to class, right? So what they did is and I love this, listen, so they took a selection of schools in this area, and the teachers' attendance was monitored daily using cameras, and their salaries were made a non-linear function of attendance. So basically, if they went to teach classes, the students took photographs of the teachers in the class, and if they had sufficient attendance, then they got paid, right? Now, it's such a ridiculous problem to have. And it seems like such a simple solution. But listen to this. When they implemented this system, absenteeism by teachers fell by 21 percentage points, and children's test scores increased by 0.17 standard deviations. So, simply by obligating teachers to show up to class, by threatening, by incentivizing them with money, children's test scores increased dramatically and the absenteeism fell dramatically. Simple solution for a simple problem, right? And evidence that just actually being there is half the work, right? There's this expression, this saying in the world of photography. They say, how do you get to be a great photographer, right? And the answer is F8 and be there. So that means F8 is the most common setting on the aperture of your camera. Okay? It's like the basic setting. So how do you become a famous photographer? Get your camera and be there. Like half of the work is just going and doing it. And this is evidence that when teachers show up, test scores increase. Duh. Okay, and a similar piece of her work, okay. Now, this was a little bit different. So in Kenya, this is in Kenya, different country, different continent, they have a similar problem with teacher absenteeism, okay, similar problem. And so this time, instead of trying to incentivize the teachers with money, what they did was they hired contract teachers. So these were trained teachers, but they could not get jobs officially as civil servants at that point, okay? Because there was a long waiting list and other bureaucratic problems. So they hired these contract teachers to work as kind of auxiliaries to help reduce the class sizes. Because listen to this, the average class size was between 82 and 44 students. Whoo! Imagine having 82 students in your class. Okay, so they hired these contract teachers on temporary contracts to come in and help, basically. Now, what's interesting is the effect that it had on the system. So the first effect that it had was that the permanent teachers at the school stopped trying. They were like, we've got help now. I've got a smaller class now, so I can just relax. So that's a negative effect of having more help. But some really important positive effects. So listen to this, right? So despite the class sizes reducing, this did not affect the test scores of the permanent teachers, right? So even though they had less students, more opportunities to talk to the individual students, the test scores didn't increase. But in contrast, scores increased for students assigned to the locally hired contract teachers because they were enthusiastic and energetic and new, right? They had energy. So they improved the test scores of their students, and the other civil servant teachers, the permanent teachers, were like, now I can relax. And so this shows similar thing, but different, similar but different, that teachers have to show up, but they also have to care. They have to do a good job. We need both of those things to happen. Okay, so let's move on to the next piece of work, which is how can the economy affect parents? What can we do to help parents send their children to school? Because remember, in a lot of poor countries, a lot of parents don't send their children to school because they can't afford it or they don't see the value in education. Now, in a lot of these countries, they do something called a CCT, a conditional cash transfer. Basically, they say to these parents, we'll give you money if you send your children to school and if you are poor, sufficiently poor, okay? Now, here's the mind-blowing thing. Now, because these conditional cash transfers, because they have these two conditions, the condition that the family needs to be tested to see if they're sufficiently poor, and the other condition is that the children go to school, this has a big administrative cost. They need people to go and test the families. Do you have money? They need people to check that the children are going to school. And all of this stuff, listen to this. The standard features, right, account for 60% of the administrative costs. So basically, 60% of that money, which should go to the family to send the children to school, it goes towards administering the program. It's terrible economics, right? So this is what they did. They completely changed it. They said, right, we'll give you the money with no conditions. We don't care if you're rich or, well, not rich or poor, but this community is poor. So we'll give the money to everyone in the community, no test. And we'll give it to you if your child goes to school or not. Here's the money, right? Now, the clever thing they did, the good thing is that the program was administered through the local schools. So to get the money, you had to go to the school and fill out the paperwork, right? And so this created this idea, and this is what they said in the paper. The program increased parents' belief that education was a worthwhile investment. Belief. And it had exactly the effect that you would expect. So basically, this type of unconditional money had exactly the same effect as the conditional money, but with much less administrative costs, which means it's cheaper and more effective and just better. Okay, let's move right along. I hope that I'm doing justice to their work, because, you know, it's quite technical. Okay. Now we're going to talk about what teachers and school administrators can do in the classroom to make a difference. So there's in school systems, you can have a thing called tracking. Tracking is where you divide students onto different tracks depending on their abilities. So if you have students that are really great at maths, they understand all the concepts, you put them in group 1, top level group. If you have students who are, well, not so good at maths, group B, and then the bad students, group C, right? Now, in theory, this could create more of a problem than it solves, because when you have all of these great students at the top group with the top teacher, then the distance between the great group and the terrible group grows bigger, right? This could be a problem. So what they did was they split them into 3 groups, but the way that they implemented the groups, well, it's very technical. It's very technical the way they did it. But I'm going to explain what worked and why it worked. So there was 2 things. The first thing, they discovered that dividing groups does work. And the reason it works is because it gives the children who don't understand, it gives them an opportunity to catch up. It gives them an opportunity to really understand. So, you know, that's what can help a student to move from a lower level to a higher level, is if they get the concepts, right? So tracking was good because it allowed students time to catch up. But tracking was also effective if the teacher taught at the level of the best student in that group. Okay, that's an important thing, right? So if the teacher's in group C and they're teaching to the worst student in the worst group, if they're teaching at this level, nobody benefits, okay? The teacher has to teach at the top level of their group. And that's important. And also, what they discovered was that if you have good students, so imagine in group C, you have some students that are at the top of group C and some students at the bottom of group C. If you put them together, okay, you put good and bad students together, then those really good students help the bad students to come up and do better. So, you know, the teacher has to be here, and we have to bring up the bad students by putting them with good students. Okay, that's what we can do in the classroom to make a difference. Now, finally, now this aspect of the work, again, is really interesting. Okay, so there were two experiments. One, they were both in India, and they were about the classroom, but they were about involving the community in the classroom. So this first study here was that they hired young women who were not teachers. They hired young women to teach students who were having problems with reading and writing and arithmetic, with maths and language, okay? So these young women, their job was to go to these students who were behind, who were having problems, and they spent 2 hours a day, I think, I did highlight it, oh man. I think they spent 2 hours a day with the children, helping them to catch up, okay, helping them to catch up. And this increased the average test scores of all the children by 0.28 standard deviation, mostly by the huge gains experienced by the children at the bottom of the test score deviation distribution. Okay, so basically the worst students really came up a lot when they were helped by these young women from the community. And something similar, they wanted to improve the way, well, that's not necessary to explain this. So basically, I'm sorry, they got some youth, some children, some young people from the local community to volunteer to teach reading camps, okay? And the children who attended these volunteer reading camps substantially improved their reading skills. Because at the moment, in grade 5 in rural India, only 56% of children can read a simple story. Okay, so this volunteer reading camp really made a massive difference to their reading skills. So this tells us, right, there's evidence that you don't need to be a qualified teacher to make a difference. And you don't need to have a qualified teacher as your teacher to be helped. This is an important lesson because it means that anybody in the community who can help can really make a massive difference. So, I just want to say thanks to Esther and her husband, and also to Michael for their amazing work. And I hope this makes everyone realize how lucky they are to live in a rich country. I'm Christian, this is Canguro English. I'll see you in class.